PMQs Unpacked is coming. Welcome along if you've only recently joined Type Station. What is this what we're talking about? Mariana Foster, she's here every day from 1 till 3 with anecdotes about going to a sex film with Iggy Pop. More of that from 1 o'clock. But PMQs Unpacked is... Oh, the camera. I think the cameras are on. I think Kim's just thrown the big switch. So you can, as well as listening along on Times Radio, on your DAB, on your smart speaker, or on the Times Radio app, you can watch along on the Times Radio YouTube channel. Yes, the cameras are on. The cameras are on. There we go. Good. Good greetings from Canada, says Dan. Hello all from Bishop Stortford, says Chris. Let the bun fight begin. Hi, Matt. It's Terry in Liverpool. Good afternoon from Phuket in Thailand, says David Lee is in our both. Will we have any argy-bargy about the Bibby Stockholm, says Christopher. Candy is in upstate New York as ever. John is in Sherwood Forest. Welcome along to you all. Lara Spirit's here. Hello. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Still
How are you?
reeling from Mariella's Iggy Pop anecdote.
That was quite overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, I know.
It should be some sort of warning. warning. Mariella's about to do an anecdote. Now, it's the last one. It's the last one of the season.
It is.
And more importantly, Rishi Sunak's here.
Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, Stephen Flynn, they're all back. I mean, not that they were away, but obviously due to Rishi Sunak being away, we had some stand-ins for the past few weeks. I think it's fair to say that they weren't the most exhilarating stand-ins either. So I didn't think I'd ever be super psyched for a particular PMQs, but given it's nearly the last day of term, it's the last PMQs of term, and it's the Prime Minister back, I think it could be quite an interesting one.
And what do you think Keir Starmer is going to raise?
Well, it's interesting because, I think Rishi Sunak, if questioned on the economy, will probably mention this morning's inflation figures.
Yeah.
We'll probably talk about, as Oliver Dowden has, and he has himself before many times, the fact that the IMF and others have said that his economic strategy is the right one. I think he'll be on solid footing, or he'll feel that he's on solid footing with that regard if he's questioned on that. It's likely that we'll see what we have seen, in true form of Keir Starmer over the course of these previous PMQs, which is lines of inquiry based on public services, quotes on waiting lists, on other, on justice areas where he feels, especially crime. We've seen a lot of features in PMQs. Those are areas that we could see. Yeah. I think one of the things that journalists are eagerly looking out for today is whether or not this, Labour keeping the 2-child benefit cap is going to come up. We've been looking at this picture of a mug on the desk of various lobby journalists.
Explain what's happening. So it's unlikely that Keir Starmer's going to go near this. But it looks like Stephen Flynn, the leader of the SNP, might do. What's the SNP been leaving on people's desks in Westminster?
So they've been leaving mugs which says controls on family sizes. What's the point of Labour inside? It's got Stephen Flynn headed yellow paper, Stephen Flynn MP, SNP Westminster leader, with compliments saying the Labour Party has a new range of mugs in production. They're made in China, just like Sir Keir Starmer's latest policy. So inevitable that they should go on that, I think.
And actually, you've pointed it out when you've been doing the best of the rest. Increasingly, Stephen Flynn sort of taking pot shots at both Tories and Labour in one cleverly worded question. Lovely. Well, Lara will be back for the best of the rest a bit later on. And Tim Shipman will be here, and Stig Abell joining us live in the studio. You can watch along on the YouTube channel now. If you are watching on the YouTube channel, share it. Spread the news. Let other people know about the Times Radio YouTube channel. So they can, your friends and family and other people acquaintances, work colleagues, people on LinkedIn, can also watch along, or indeed put it on Threads. Right, we'll be live in the House of Commons in just a moment. Let's stick with the Commons, and after PMQs this afternoon, Dame Maria Miller, the Tory MP, is presenting a bill, a backbench bill, looking at changing the sentencing guidelines when it comes to abortion. In particular, obviously it follows this story from a couple of weeks ago. The 45-year-old Carla Foster was jailed for illegally obtaining abortion tablets to end her pregnancy during lockdown. We found out yesterday she'll be released early from prison after the Court of Appeal reduced her sentence. We can speak to Maria now. Maria, what is it that you hope to do with this backbench bill?
The bill's very simply designed to get guidance in place for judges when they're sentencing people under the 1861 Offences Against the People Act in connection with abortion. So, in essence, would make sure that there wasn't a lack of clarity as to what women, if are found to be in court, as a result of having an abortion. At the moment, there's no guidance in place. As a result, saw the case where she was sent to jail, and now seen that the Court of Appeal said, no, that's absolutely wrong. She shouldn't have been sent to jail. She has a suspended sentence, yet poor Carla's had to wait a number of weeks for that to play itself out. If we'd have had sentencing guidance in place, that wouldn't have happened.
It was because the judge felt that it was only based on the guidance in front of them in the court that was why she was handed a jail sentence.
Well, the previous judge, the initial judge, had to look at case law, of which there is much in this area, and therefore came to a conclusion that a custodial sentence is required. The Court of Appeal have overturned that completely and said, no, we should be showing compassion, not punishment, in these sort of. So given that the Court of Appeal has said that now, obviously the Sentencing Council have to look at it. It's for them to make those recommendations, but they also have to go to public inquiry, public consultation on it. So they would be taking into account the fact that the women's health has moved on seismically since 1861 when this law was put in place. And of course, really what the House of Commons should be doing is should be looking at a complete reform of abortion law, taking it outside of criminal. It is the medical treatment provided by the NHS, which is still governed by criminal law, and that, I think, needs to change. But that's not the aim of the bill today. It's simply taking a small step forward to put in place sentencing to get, to get some clear guidance for the courts to be able to take.
Really good to speak to you. Thanks so much, Tory MP Dame Maria Miller, joining us there. Not a brilliant line, so apologies about that, but hopefully you got the gist of what she was saying about the bill that she's putting forwards. That is coming later on this afternoon in the House of Commons. PMQs Unpacked is up next. Then at 1 o'clock, Meredith Fosstrop will be here. Who knows what bombshell she'll drop after that Iggy Pop story a bit earlier on. Then Jane Garvey and Fee Glover are here from 3 o'clock. Their big interview today with the author Lisa Jewell. John Pienaar's here with Times Radio Drive from 5. Kate Boss is here from 8 o'clock tonight. And, of course, Carol Walker here from 10. Take a look at tomorrow's papers as they come in. But stand by, you are on your YouTube channels. Tim Shipman's arrived.
Good morning.
Oh, it is still just more and far more excitingly, not that it's not exciting that you're here, Tim. Stig Abell's here.
Sorry, Tim.
That's all right.
Slightly more exciting.
Getting used to having additional assistants.
Oh, yeah. I'll be very quiet.
Well, it's to try and G things up a bit, Tim, because there's been a bit...
Has it been flat?
A little bit.
Since Zippy.
Yeah, you've got a lot to live up to.
I'm very much the bungle of Times Radio, I'd like to think.
We've had a tennis commentator... the man from the X Factor and Zippy from Rainbow.
And me.
And now you.
It's a funny Venn diagram, that, isn't it?
Yeah. It's basically whoever's available, Steve.
I've noticed that.
Right, so we are live on Times Radio, on your smart speaker, on your DAB, and on the Times Radio app. But more importantly, we are live on the Times Radio YouTube channel. If you want to see what Stig is wearing today, get on the YouTube channel. Let us know where you're watching. PMQs Unpacked is next on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. PMQs Unpacked in just a moment. First, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. Costs in shops have increased by 7.9% in the last year, but compared to the year up to May, they are at least up more slowly. Fuel prices have levelled out. Alcohol, culture and housing-related costs stayed exactly the same. Rishi Sunak's expected to delay transgender guidance for schools after the Attorney General said plans to make it stricter would be unlawful. The draft guidance stated that children should be allowed to socially transition with the consent of their parents, but that was deemed to be in breach of equality law. The owner of Jaguar Land Rover is to build an electric car battery factory in Somerset, creating thousands of new British jobs. Tata Motors will invest more than £4 billion into the project. And the Conservative candidate for Mayor of London next year will be Susan Hall. She beat the only remaining candidate, barrister Mo Hussein, with 57% of the members' vote. The previous frontrunner, Daniel Korski, dropped out of the race after the Times reported claims he groped a woman. There'll be more news and sport in half an hour, but now, live on Times Radio and the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
And Tim Shipman is indeed here. Tim, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Matt.
And Stig Abell's here.
Hello.
From Times Radio Breakfast, but you already know that. Do you normally bother with PMQs, Stig?
I do. I'm one of these things that I'm often on a train and I listen for 10 minutes. I do get annoyed by it. So I'm one of these people that I start it, but don't always finish it. And I often didn't get all the way through to Ian Blackford.
Is it the content of the questions or the analysis by Tim and I that's pushed you both off?
I enjoy the analysis. I find the content. I find the schoolboy and girl nature of it really annoying.
That's no way to speak about Matt and I.
No. And I find the speaker very annoying.
Well, he gets cross if people say that.
I just can't bear it. It's sort of so ostentatious. I always think sort of weak geography supply teacher being ostentatious, and it annoys me.
Let us know on the YouTube channel what you think might happen today. John says you're not live on the YouTube channel yet. Yeah, we are, John. I can literally see it. You need to hit refresh or something. Gareth is in Devon. David is in the Philippines. There we are. Why isn't Stig wearing his white crash helmet? It's different. It's an old joke, but that's fine.
Got a goodie.
Stig is in the house. Hello from Hong Kong. Hello from Wiltshire. Richard's in Fleet. Good to see you, Richard. Good morning from sunny Plymouth. Staying at the Grand Hotel in Port Talbot. It was one of the most memorable nights of my life, says Richard.
There's a story
I think we need more, don't we?
We might be glad of that by about 1:15. Tim, last one of the term.
Yes, and the A-team is back.
Yes.
This is very exciting.
Yeah,
We haven't seen
the
them
past
for
couple of weeks have
and
been a bit low energy.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say.
Discovering that Oliver Dowder was an anagram of wood and drivel was basically the highlight of the past fortnight.
Very much so. And we got by-elections coming up. We got inflation dropping, so I'm sure we'll hear about that from the Prime Minister. Probably 6 times as he attempts to cobble an answer together.
Do you think anyone will mention the battery factory?
Battery factory.
I'm allowed, to be clear, I'm allowed
triumph.
to do the Somerset accent because it's where I'm from.
Exactly.
I'm not
But
mocking.
we're not.
You're not.
We won't be doing that.
Don't
Were they
worry.
building a battery factory in Loughborough?
Yeah, I'd just be right at it.
Yeah.
I'd be hard at it, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to be appreciating your accent.
Yes, very
No
good.
one's ever built a battery factory in Lincolnshire where I grew up. So
Well, maybe it's time to.
exactly, levelling up.
Shot in the arm.
Yeah, Brexit benefit right there.
Yeah. Lincolnshire, wasn't it like the most vox-popped... Boston, isn't it? Was it Boston and Lincolnshire was like the most vox-popped town in Britain?
I think, Boston became interesting when they started voting for Nigel Farage.
Yeah, that's very good. Right, are we ready to go to the House of Commons? We are all geared up, ready for Keir Starmer? Yeah, good. Here we go then, live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio
You're
YouTube
bringing
channel.
the energy.
Yeah, here we go. Pumped, lively. Stig's on the edge of his seat.
Yes!
Here is question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, Labour in government was proud to repeal the ban against LGBT plus people serving in our armed forces. And today we strongly welcome this apology from the Prime Minister as a recognition of their historic mistreatment. Mr. Speaker, my constituent Ken Wright was a proud RAF serviceman, forced to leave the job he loved simply because he was gay. I'm delighted he is here today to witness this apology. And whilst we cannot right the wrongs of the past, the government should now act on the recommendations of the Etherton Review to fix the lives broken by the ban. It's what LGBT plus veterans deserve. Mr. Speaker, I also know the whole House will want to send our very best wishes to the Lionesses as they start their World Cup campaign this Saturday. Let's hope they continue the brilliant success they had in the Euros. Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister took office 9 months ago, the NHS waiting list had 7.2 million people on it. What's the number today?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the reason that the NHS waiting lists are higher today than they were then, after actually being stable for the first few months as we put in place new initiatives, is very simple, and that's because the NHS has been disrupted by industrial action, Mr. Speaker. Now, we've put very clear plans in place to bring down waiting lists in urgent and emergency care, in primary care, in ambulances and outpatients and electives. Those plans were working and will continue to work, but we do need to end the industrial action. So I'd ask the honourable gentleman, if he does care about bringing the waiting list down, does he agree with me that consultants and junior doctors should accept the pay deal that the government offered?
Well, there's quite a lot to unpack there. So this is slightly the nature of these things. We always go straight into Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak already committing news of a sort, Tim. What's he said this morning? He's apologised to gay military veterans over the ban on them serving in the armed forces.
There you go, you've answered your own question.
Well, I wasn't totally sure if you looked a bit like you might not know that that's what had happened. Oh, you have? Oh, good. Why has he done that today?
I don't know.
Right, fine.
David Cameron always likes apologising for things he hadn't done.
Yeah.
It's quite a safe territory, isn't it?
In fact, if David Cameron had been Prime Minister, we would have had sort of reparations for slavery, I suspect.
Well, Gordon Brown apologised for...
to Alan Turing, I think,
and
didn't he?
people being sent to Australia,
Possibly, yes. Yeah. Transportation.
It's very safe ground, isn't it? Because it's not, they can't be blamed for it, but they're doing something nice, and I think that probably is a thing they're quite happy with.
Saves them having to be nice to real living people sometimes.
Yeah, so Rishi Sunak said he acknowledged many LGBT veterans endured the most horrific sexual violence, and he hopes everyone affected will be able to feel proud to be part of the British veteran community.
And we're not beyond the realms of possibility that doing things on a Wednesday morning just gives him half an answer of sort of respite when he gets to PMQs.
He gets to PMQs, exactly right. Then, once he'd got through all of that, Keir Starmer moved on to NHS waiting lists.
Yeah, which they haven't, they've done a lot more housing than NHS recently. So, but those waiting lists have been creeping up. The answer he didn't get, I think, is it's gone to 7.4 million from 7.2.
Don't give it away. We're on a tenterhooks to find out.
Well, we can see whether I'm right.
Well, you said
I probably got it a bit wrong. But Sunak reasonably sort of keyed up in his response and saying, well, it's got worse because of all these strikes and we've given a decent pay offer to people and most people have accepted it. But the BMA, God bless them, are, quietly one of the most militant trade unions in the country and they're still holding out. So he's now trying to swing it back on Starmer on that front.
And you'll know, Stig, from the amount of messages we get, people are much more cross about the junior doctors going out, demanding 35% and going out on strike than the other areas. In large parts of the other public sector is now settled.
And the consultants as well. Consultants even more so than junior doctors. So, we had a consultant on and he made the very good point that this is just a market forces argument. There are too many doctors leaving the NHS to go to other countries. And if you want to keep them, you need to pay them more. And that's not a question of what even you think they deserve. It's a question of you want to keep them, you have to pay them what they're worth in the open market, the international market. And that does have a bit of traction, I think. But he clearly wants to say, the problem is industrial action, the problem is socialism, you're a socialist, I'm not a socialist, Keir Starmer.
The other interesting thing about him going on the NHS is the Lib Dems have been really pushing the NHS in the past. Because you had Ed Davey on... What was he going to enshrine into law?
I didn't understand this, Tim. I don't know if you can explain this to me. He said, we want to make it a legal right that you can see your GP within a week.
Yeah.
And I said, OK, if I can't see my GP in a week, what does a legal right mean? What do I get? What do I do?
Who do you sue? Who pays you money?
And who gives you money? And he said he got very weird about the NHS constitution. He really couldn't say the answers. So, what's the actual benefit of me having a legal right? And there appears
I suspect the answer to that is that you get no benefit from it at all, but the people failing to deliver you that legal right then face some form of sanction.
He seemed to be saying that it was a legal right on the government, not on your local GP surgery either. So it just becomes a sort of big amorphous thing. But
let's make the NHS more complicated. That would be a good idea.
The Lib Dems hammered GP access in the Tiverton and Honiton by-election, which they ended up winning. And they've been really hammering it at PMQs last week. Ed Davey asked about dentists.
Yeah, dentists are a huge issue in the South.
Albeit, he asked about dentists in charge, which aren't actually in the constituency. But, so it's quite interesting that Keir Starmer's drifted back onto that, having done housing so much. Anyway, there we are. We've unpacked quite a lot there.
I think there was more in that first exchange than there has been in the last fortnight.
I think you're absolutely right. Let's go back to the House of Commons then. This is question number 2 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker,
The Prime Minister likes to get away here. The more that you stop me getting on with the questions, the more I'm going to keep him here. So it's up to you how long you want the Prime Minister. Keir Starmer.
Stig's shaking his head already.
That's exactly my point.
House is pleased that he's graced us with his presence today. But we don't get any more answers when he's here than when he's not. He knows the answer. 7 million people currently on the waiting list. Prime Minister, that's the highest it's ever been. It means that since he stepped foot into Downing Street, 100,000 people have been waiting in daily agony for things like hip and knee replacements, while he boasts. Has he figured out why, after 9 months, dozens of gimmicks, umpteen broken promises, his government is failing more patients than ever before?
Mr. Speaker, again, I don't think we heard an answer to the question, right?
And also, I don't want you holding up proceedings, Prime Minister.
It's very simple. If the honourable gentleman actually looked at what was happening earlier this year, what we have seen actually is that our plans were beginning to work. Ambulance and waiting times down from an hour and a half over Christmas to around half an hour. Virtually eliminating the number of people waiting 1.5 years for treatment, making huge progress on GP access. Now, all those things, all those plans we put in place, all the funding, all the extra ambulances, the extra discharge, all starting to make a difference, all held up by one very simple fact: industrial action in the NHS. Now, again, I'll give him a second chance. If he really wants to get people the health care that they want, will he agree with me that those doctors should accept the recommendations of the independent pay review body?
We're that close to Lindsay Hoyle saying it's Prime Minister's questions.
You don't get to ask the questions, Prime Minister.
That is unbelievable, isn't it, that it's Leader of the Opposition questions?
Yeah. And what that does, though, is that it's all part of this accidentally, on the Tories' part, creating a sense of inevitability about Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister.
Yeah.
That once everyone, without even thinking about it, they fall into the mindset of what are you asking him, well, what are you going to do when you're Prime Minister?
And we do that all the time on the Breakfast Show. We have Labour every day.
Yeah.
And it's just very easy to say, well, in a year's time, you'll be in power, won't you?
Yeah. And then it creates that.
Presumably they want.
Yeah.
Let's hope that if he does make it to power, that he can get his syntax sorted out. I mean, it's silly, isn't it, to poke fun at things? But 7 point more million was brilliant, I thought. I mean, that gets you out of all problems, doesn't it? You just say 8 point more. It's going up.
That's a big number, Tim.
Yeah. And then 100,000. It was like having Priti Patel back doing the numbers, wasn't it?
But also, what you can't do is when you've said to him, there were 7.2 million. What is it now?
Yeah, and then you don't get the number.
Your big reveal come out in 7 point more million.
I love it.
You'll be pleased to know there's some more Lindsay Hoyle. Would you like to hear it, Stig?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, this is what he said.
Can I just say to the Prime Minister, it's opposition questions, it's Prime Minister's questions.
There we go.
There we are.
It's just so awful, isn't it? As a spectacle, I mean, it really is. I mean, I know it has been really good. I know there have been titans who've been, debating the issues of the day across the dispatch box, but Sunak, Starmer are not those titans, are they?
No, but as I said, I mean, ironically, this is the most bravura Sunak's been in about 2 months, I would say. And he does actually have an argument to make, at least, even if he's framing it as a question, which he shouldn't be. Whether we should all reflect on the fact that he's promising us extra discharge in the NHS, I don't know.
Someone's pointed out that Penny Mordaunt's... lots of people note how miserable Penny Mordaunt looks. Penny Mordaunt always looks as though she'd rather be somewhere else.
Well, holding a sword.
She looks as unhappy as ever.
She'll never get better than that, though, will she?
It's never going to top that, is it?
No.
Even if she becomes Prime Minister one day.
Especially if she does, perhaps. Tim, does it work, this? Because presumably the thing he's trying to do, Rishi Sunak, is to say, you lot are left-wing, you lot are in the pocket of the unions. And is that the big thing? Because he's sort of recognised that Labour are trying to say we're centrist now, we're Blairites now. We had Yvette Cooper on and wouldn't say she was a socialist. And is that the line we're going to get for another 18 months, that you are old-fashioned Labour, brackets, a bit Corbyn-y, even though you pretend to be like Blair?
I think there's a bit of that. And don't forget what they did, what the argument was about Tony Blair before he took power. It was that, he'd still be in, this Bambi character who's going to be pushed around by all these wicked unions. So, yes, that's clearly the big threat to the Tories. We're going to hear lots more about it. But I think there's two things going on here. It's not just making that argument. It's also trying to cheer up everybody behind you who's miserable, thinks they're going to lose 3 by-elections and thinks everything's going in the wrong direction. And it has been for 2 months. And Sunak's trying to show at least we've got an argument here that you can use on the doorstep that we can take to these people in the autumn. And if you listen to Downing Street, they're talking a big game about upping their energy, not sitting around just being technocrats, but getting stuck in.
And Rishi Sunak is better.
Gloves off.
Rishi Sunak is better at the dispatch box than in lots of other settings. When he's doing press conferences or speeches, it's all a little bit favourable. And I think he's quite, he does better.
Yeah. His best format is probably is sort of a medium to small group where he can just sort of chat to people. That's probably, the sort of small town hall is probably his best setting. Yeah. This is probably his next best. We all wait and wonder what on earth will happen at conference where, he's going to have to do a big platform speech.
That's a good point.
I think he should do a Cameron where he memorises it.
Just wander around.
And we could all just say what a great job he's memorised me for 40 minutes. That
won't too much about the content.
Yeah,
either that or get a very tiny podium that makes him look enormous.
Or a really, really tall, he could be on a very high platform.
He could stand next to Daniel
on a
Kaczynski, couldn't he?
trapeze.
Yeah.
At all times.
Yeah, maybe you should do that trick. The old, I've torn up my speech. Was it in Blackpool, David
Literally
Cameron?
tear it up. You could go and go
They
even
had-
further than Cameron.
there
You could
were-
walk on stage with the thing.
There were pictures. A photographer caught David Cameron walking like in his hotel room, not quite tearing them up, but like walking around, learning his speech. And then the next day they said, no, he's torn it up.
I've got to say, it worked a bit with both when I know Miliband forgot to mention the economy, but just as an act of remembering, I was slightly impressed. I thought, well done. It's not the thing everyone can do. I mean, anyone can read out these boring speeches which have 4 words for each paragraph.
Tell that to Theresa May.
Oh, fair enough.
We introduced, producer Kia works on my show. She's from Australia. She wasn't familiar with the Theresa May coughing speech. And we introduced it to her today. And
How wonderful to see that for
exactly.
the first time.
I know. And to be there with her was a beautiful moment. It was a beautiful moment. Her face lit up like it was Christmas. Right, we can go back to the House of Commons now to see for intervention number 3 from Lindsay Hoyle.
Mr. Speaker, I think with his time away, he's slightly forgotten how this works. And he talks about his plans. He talks about his plans, his NHS staffing plan. He doesn't need to lecture me.
Hold on.
Oh, here he
It
goes.
might be the last one before recess, but I'd just say to somebody, if they really want to take and go early, it will be very tempting to ensure that we do it. But think long and hard before you do. Keir Starmer.
If you know what that
Thank
means,
you,
do
Mr.
get in touch
Speaker.
with
He
the usual
talks
ways.
about his plans. He doesn't need to lecture me on that. On the NHS staffing plan, he nicked it from Labour. Yes. It's the same old story. They mess up the NHS and look to Labour to fix it. Come the election, the country will be doing the same. The difference is that, unlike us, he hasn't said how he'd pay for his workforce plan. Now's his chance. Where's the money coming from?
Mr. Speaker, not only is the NHS long-term workforce plan fully funded, it was welcomed by not 1, not 2, but by 43 different NHS stakeholders, Mr. Speaker. But no, he talks about our plans and are they making a difference? Well, let's just look in urgent and emergency care. Our plans mean that we'll put 800 more ambulances on the road, 5,000 more beds, faster discharge, more community care. That's why the Royal College of Emergency Medicine described it as significant and that it will undoubtedly improve conditions. But that's why, Mr. Speaker, what have we seen? A&E waiting times in England, the best in 2 years, Mr. Speaker. While, Mr. Speaker, and they won't like this, while the NHS has the worst waiting times in the country in Wales, Mr. Speaker.
There we are.
Ones are the best.
Nothing gets me going more than the phrase 43 stakeholders.
I know.
Not 1, not 2. He should have done them all. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, all the way up to 40.
And they were very proud of that. I remember on the day, we've got 43 different quotes on the press release. And, fair play to them. They haven't managed to pull that off. The second you use the word stakeholders, even most people in Westminster have no idea what you're talking about.
It's in the top 5 list of awful managerial euphemisms of the age.
The only time you can use the word stakeholder is when Tim and I went and had a lovely steak lunch, didn't we, Tim?
There was that.
Lots of people were asking on the YouTube channel about the lunch, the dinner that you promised me, because we had a bet a few weeks ago.
I remember.
And Tim and I, we've been in and out our lunch, and you'll be able to hear what happened.
Everything's content.
Everything's content.
Everything is content.
You'll be able to hear what happened once I finish cutting out the bits which are not for broadcast.
I bet there's some defamatory stuff in there.
Oh, very much so.
Brilliant.
Very much so.
And very much Matt more likely to lose his job than me.
Which is why I'm editing it. You'll be able to hear that on Food Week in a couple of weeks' time. So that'll be good. I feel like we're slightly disappearing into sort of technocrat wonkathon on who's got the better workforce plan.
True, but an interesting pivot from Starmer, from just sort of asking banal questions, about numbers. He's now saying, well, he's now trying to run the argument that the Tories haven't said where the money's coming from. Now, Sunak can say it's fully funded because what he's actually done is said to everybody in government departments, all these different wage deals have to come out of your existing budget. So he can say it's fully funded because the money was already handed to those departments. What we don't know is what else is being cut in order to pay for it. But it's interesting if Starmer is going to start turning that traditional sort of Tory argument around on the government and say, well, come on then, you haven't told us where the cash is coming from.
But everything the government does is kind of fully funded, isn't it? Because they have the money. So by virtue of spending it, they're
tell that to Liz Truss.
That's true.
Some of those things were not fully funded.
No.
It turned out. Well, let's go back to the House of Commons now. This is question number 4 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, when he said the workforce plan was fully costed, I've never seen the Chancellor more bewildered. It's less than a year since his party crashed the economy with their unfunded spending commitments, and he hasn't learned a thing. So let me ask it another way. Is his uncosted spending coming from more tax rises, more cuts, or is it just the latest promise to fall from the Tories' magic money tree?
Mr. Speaker, as I and the Chancellor set out, the plan is fully funded. He'll see that at the autumn statement. But I am pleased. I am pleased he's now interested in fiscal responsibility, because that is very welcome, Mr. Speaker. Because there's an opportunity for us to make sure that this is true conviction. We've just had, Mr. Speaker, in the last week, we've had the recommendations of independent pay review bodies, including for the NHS. Now, I believe the right thing to do was to accept those independent recommendations, but that involves taking difficult and responsible decisions to deliver those pay rises without fueling borrowing, inflation, taxes and debt. But on this crucial issue, Mr. Speaker, while his MPs are back on the picket lines, yet again on this issue, he simply refuses to take a position. It's the same old story. He should stop taking inspiration from his friends outside and unglue himself from the fence.
Oh, I think that's an Oliver Dowden joke.
Well, if it was delivered better than Oliver Dowden has delivered them of late. I mean, there's a bit of noise behind him today.
Yeah.
In terms of the cut and thrust in the chamber, however banal we might find the content, he's doing all right today.
Do you think that? I mean, do they know it's the end of? Is it sort of end of term?
It is end of term, and they want to go to the summer feeling better about themselves than they felt a little while ago. And if you go through Sunak's answers, they were sort of that. It's not what you need to be optimist to put hope together out of all those. But if he's right that A&E waiting times are coming down, that ambulance times are coming down, that's not going to have much of an impact yet. But if you get 4 months of that continuing, then they'll start to feel like they're turning the corner a little bit.
I'm still surprised when I've listened to this how little you get answers. I mean, I don't know why I should be, because whenever I do political interviews, I always beat myself up. I didn't get anything out of them. Why did I not get more out of them? And then you see these guys with all this, the resource behind them. They don't really get anything either, do they? They know how not to give an answer.
Yeah, true. But equally, I think, and you shouldn't beat yourself up. I mean, when I listen to you or anybody else, I'm trying to see to what degree they're not answering, or to what degree they're sort of, how are they not answering?
Yeah.
How uncomfortable do they feel not answering?
To some extent,
you can learn quite a lot on a meta level.
But doing a print interview, as you do, is much harder.
It's a totally different exercise.
Because if you ask a question on the radio and they don't answer it 5 times, that's great, because everyone can see what they're doing. But in print, you've just got a load of unusable quotes.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, if it's really bad, you can just about turn it around and do a total, this is what really happened. I've done that once on Theresa May, where it was just impossible. And my intro was something like, we're 9 minutes in and she said she's strong 12 times, stable 13 times. And
that was you don't like burning that bridge, presumably.
Well, I didn't have a lot of choice in that one. Even her aides were sitting there pulling their hair out, wondering why she wouldn't answer any questions. I remember Jonathan Oliver did a brilliant one on Gordon Brown, where he literally printed every word that Gordon said, down to all the ums and ahs and the refusals to do anything. But you can only pull that trick very occasionally. Someone got in touch with me about the Ben Wallace interview I did and said I hadn't challenged him greatly. As a serving member of the cabinet, he was criticising me for this, and I said print interviews are not effective as they're quote mining exercises. The goal is to get them to say interesting things, and I think Wallace did. If I'd sort of banged onto him about defence spending and whether or not he'd got all of it right, nobody would have read 2,000 words of it.
Well, there's a distinction, isn't there, about who's the person in that interview? This is true of radio as well. Who's the person people want to hear from? Ultimately, it's Ben Wallace, not you.
Correct.
And that's true on the radio as well, isn't it, Matt? Really, that you can make it.
I think people like hearing from me.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Less so you.
Yeah. Apart from you being the obvious exception. But if it's you, then maybe that's not right either.
Yeah. And actually, it's the thing that winds listeners up more than anything. If you do keep interrupting, without at least giving them, let them set out their boring stall first.
Yeah, and if they keep going back to the same thing, then it's legitimate to jump in, isn't it? But where they barely get... The problem is for people who are well plugged into politics doing interviews, when they know exactly where the person's going with it and try to stop them going there, it then gets a bit fractious, doesn't it? Anyway, we didn't...
Greg Hands, Tory Party chairman, has tweeted that Rishi Sunak is on fire at PMQs.
Well, let's hope someone does something about that then.
Yeah, I'm sure
I wonder if the Speaker would have anything to say about that.
Lindsay Hoyle will hose him down with some more repartee.
I'd like to see how quickly each member of the Cabinet ran to the hose to help him. That would be a good test, wouldn't it? Test of loyalty there.
Right, here we go then. Let's find out what's happening. It's question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
Oh, we want some more. Who wants to lead the exit? Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, in that burst of nonsense, what you didn't hear was a single word about how he's going to be paying for it. Labour's NHS workforce plan is fully funded by scrapping the non-dom status that he so adores. You know the one?
Yeah, we do.
Non-dom.
Well, I think one or two of you have asked to catch my eye.
Lindsay's back.
You're not going the right way. Keir Starmer.
That's now more interventions than the Leader of the Opposition.
Labour's
like he knows I'm here.
Is fully funded by scrapping the non-dom status that he so adores. You know the one, the non-dom tax thing, as he calls it, that allows some of the wealthiest people in the country to avoid paying tax here. Is that loophole so important to him that he'd rather have billions in unfunded promises than simply making billionaires pay what they owe?
Mr. Speaker, the same policy that has paid, I think, for 5 different things at this point. I think, Mr. Speaker, everybody knows that I'm a fan of doing maths to 18, but the honourable gentleman makes a very strong case for doing maths all the way to 61, quite frankly.
Is he 61?
He is.
He is, yeah.
When it comes, Mr. Speaker... But when it comes to the substance of the plan, it's important we address this, right? I am aware, actually, and I will say this. He did set out some proposals to train more staff. The problem is, Mr. Speaker, that's all he did. Our plan is much more comprehensive and it's much more impactful because not only will we train more staff, Mr. Speaker, well, no, this is important substance because I acknowledge the party opposite did set out some plans to train more, but that's not enough. You also have to set out plans, as we did, to retain more NHS staff. And you also crucially have to set out plans to how you reform the NHS so that you can have a more productive NHS. And that is the difference between us, Mr. Speaker. He is only ever focused on the superficial headline. We're getting on and doing the actual reform.
Quite a good line.
This is good. I'm enjoying this.
61 was a
That's
good
a
gag.
good proper gag.
Yeah.
And to answer Stig's question, Starmer will be the oldest new Prime Minister because he by then would most likely be 62 since is it Callaghan?
Oh wow,
really?
Yeah, it's a long time.
It's a good gag. Also, maybe I don't know if people listening, do they think, oh, Starmer's 61? Do they think, oh, he didn't look bad for 61? Or do they think, oh God, he's 61? Yeah. I kind of thought he didn't look bad for 61.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I thought the rest of that Sunak answer was classic Sunak, though, wasn't it? It was sort of, my plan's better than yours. And, again, lots of good detail. And then accuses Starmer of going after a superficial headline. And, a lot of the MPs sitting behind Rishi Sunak would be pretty happy if he started going after a few superficial headlines.
But also, isn't Labour the one thing they're not bad at with Wes Streeting, Tim? They're quite in the weeds of the NHS reform, aren't they? Is that not an area of strength for them, the idea of reforming the NHS?
I mean, I think it will be, because if you are trying to pitch as not quite we're the new Blairites, but certainly we're prepared to do things a little bit differently, you need fiscal responsibility and you need to be prepared to stand up to some of the people that are your natural allies, and that's what Wes Streeting is doing.
I mean, and actually, the stuff that Wes has done on, it's not a shrine. It's just a public service, and it's not the envy of the world. And he said stuff about the Labour. He's said stuff about the NHS that if a Tory minister said about it, he'd be all over them.
And he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, totally. And traditionally, it has taken the Labour Party to reform the NHS because the Tories are so nervous of it, they just have to chuck money at it.
You're right. It was Callaghan.
Well done.
With only about 7 or 8 others have been older. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, there we are.
Who's the oldest Prime Minister? Does that tell you that?
Oh, actually, no, there have been older. There have been older.
If you go back a long way, there were certainly a lot that were a lot older, but in modern times, it's quite rare to be.
So he'll be older than Theresa May was when she became Prime Minister.
Unlike in America, interestingly.
Indeed, the gerontocracy.
Absolutely. I still, that boggles my mind every time I think about it. The two best candidates for the most important job in the world may be either close to their 80s or actually in their 80s.
Well, I know, and I saw my parents, my father's in his late 70s. He's a wonderful man, and I love him dearly, but I don't think he would say he was ready to start leading the free world at this stage of life.
Palmerston was the oldest, 70 he was when he became Prime Minister. Anyway, I didn't realise what the time was. We're having such a lovely time. And we've still got question number 6 and intervention number 12 to come from Lindsay Hall. Let's go back to the Commons.
Mr. Speaker, if he's so good at maths, he'd know I'm 60, not 61.
This is what we're reduced to.
I don't know whether the Prime Minister's found time to visit Hillingdon Hospital during the recent by-election, where the wards have had to close, staff are working in appalling conditions, and patient safety is at risk. And that's simply a snapshot of the wider problem. This week, the National Audit Office set out in detail what everyone already knows. The government's hospital programme has, shall we say, some gaps in it. So can the Prime Minister confirm that, apart from the fact that there aren't 40 of them, and the fact that most of them aren't new, and that many of them aren't even hospitals, everything's going fine with the 40 new hospitals?
Mr. Speaker, not only are we going to deliver on our manifesto commitment to build 40 new hospitals across the country by 2030, we're not just stopping there, Mr. Speaker, because we're also delivering 100 hospital upgrades across the country and, crucially, over 100 new community diagnostic centres to speed up treatment for people, including, Mr. Speaker, in the Deputy Leader's constituency, the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary's constituency, the Energy Secretary, the Justice Secretary, the Attorney General's constituency. That's how committed we are, Mr. Speaker. But look, let me end on this, because he mentioned Hillingdon Hospital, he mentioned Uxbridge. I tell you what, I want to help the people of this country, Mr. Speaker. I want to make sure that not only can they get to work, but they get the care they need. Why on earth does he want to charge them £12.50 every time they visit their GP and hospital?
There we are.
Finish on a ULEZ gag. First rule of showbiz.
As well. Yeah. You're here all week. Don't eat the liver. Is that right? What do you make of that then, Stig?
Well, it wasn't great, was it? I mean, by any standards, I don't think it was great.
Yeah.
But I suppose, does Rishi Sunak count as a win?
I liked that.
Does he count as a win? Will he
I think Rishi Sunak will count that as a win, yes. Yeah. That he escaped, he came back hard with a few good points, and his people behind him will go to summer a lot happier than they were this morning.
Unless they lose all 3 by-elections tomorrow.
And then they'll be upset again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he had the best jokes this week, Rishi Sunak.
He had better jokes.
Unglue himself from the fence.
Yeah.
Maths to 61.
Yeah.
ULEZ.
Let's not forget ULEZ.
That ULEZ one. The problem is that he didn't quite hit the landing, did he, on the ULEZ gag? But other than that, good effort.
Well, maybe you'll have another go at it, Stig, because you're not going anywhere. We've got the best of the rest yet. Stephen Flynn.
Oh.
Does Stephen Flynn use his PMQs to have a pop at Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer? We'll find out after we get the news from Rachel Jewell.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. Rishi Sunak has apologised on behalf of the government for what he calls the horrific, historic treatment of LGBT people serving in the military. The Prime Minister's been responding to an independent review of veterans who were forced out of their jobs under a pre-2000 ban. He's told the Commons the ban was an appalling failure of the British state, decades behind the law of the slants.
As today's report makes clear, in that period, many endured the most horrific sexual abuse and violence, homophobic bullying and harassment, all while bravely serving this country. Today, on behalf of the British state, I apologise.
The Chancellor's admitted there's a long way to go to bring inflation down to target levels. Today's dip to 7.9% for June should mean interest rates don't rise by as much as expected. The head of Britain's Secret Intelligence Service says its door is always open for potential spies to join them from Russia. MI6 chief Sir Richard Moore has also revealed that China's its biggest focus right now and that he doesn't believe artificial intelligence will take the place of agents. And a factory for electric car batteries has been confirmed for Somerset, opening up around 4,000 new jobs. Jaguar Land Rover's owner, Tata Motors, says it's investing £4 billion into the plant. A mixture of sunshine and showers for many this afternoon. Showers could turn heavy and thundery across central and eastern England. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with light winds. Toby Gillis has the sports.
In one of the most glamorous fixtures imaginable in rugby union, a combined New Zealand and Australia team will face the British and Irish Lions in a match on their tour of Australia next year. The schedule's been announced today, a year from the first official test, and that's one of a number of key announcements, as Times Radio's Kane Reeves reports.
The British and Irish Lions tour the Southern Hemisphere every 2 years, playing 3 tests against South Africa, New Zealand or Australia. But there are a number of warm-up matches for the prestigious squad, made up of the best England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland have to offer. And that's where this New Zealand-Australia combined team comes in. It's the first time the two rivals have done such a thing in 36 years. The Lions' schedule also includes a trip to the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which could see them play in front of their largest crowd ever. If it sells out, 100,000 people will watch the second test against Australia.
One of the stars of England's Women's Ashes series, Tammy Beaumont, has told Times Radio Sport they've proven they're close to Australia, the best team in the world, with their exploits over the past few weeks. England drew the points-based multi-format Ashes 8-all, having been 6-0 down after the Test match and first 2020. Within the Ashes, they won both the T20 and one-day series. But because Australia already held the trophy, a draw means they retain it. Batter Beaumont told us it's been a series that's taught the England players they can compete with the very best.
We can go toe-to-toe with them, compete throughout and come back from a bit of upset. And when we go toe-to-toe with them, we can beat them. And I think once you've got that belief that you can do that, it becomes an awful lot easier, and that gap's minimal now. I think, we've shown that we can beat them in white ball cricket, which is what we play more often at. But I certainly think we've taken some massive steps towards, getting on a par with them and hopefully one day in the future, very soon, going past them.
And less than a week after being found not guilty of rape and attempted rape, a former World Cup winning footballer has found himself a new club. Frenchman Benjamin Mendy hasn't played since August 2021 when he was at Manchester City, where his contract expired last month. He was cleared of the charges in court last week after a 2-year legal battle, and now Lorient, in his native France, say he's signed a 2-year contract with them. You can read more on these stories on the Times website or app.
This is Times Radio.
My name's Nick and I'm a 78-year-old voice actor. You may be asking yourself, shouldn't you be retired? Maybe. But truthfully, I love what I do and don't intend on stopping now. You see, people today are living longer in the UK, which means we need to talk about this whole retirement thing, what it means, what it looks like, and how we prepare for it. Search Phoenix Group, Living Longer, to start your conversation today. Phoenix Group is the brand name of Phoenix Group Holdings plc, its subsidiary companies and brands.
Hello, I'm looking to buy a new mobile phone.
OK, well, we've got the new Dynamic Core Ultra 999G processor with split screen, high-tech, megapixel built-in infinity display, and it's got another split...
Why did technology become so complicated? At Doro, we believe that mobile phones should be simple, which is why our stylish range of phones are easy to use and feature clearer displays and louder sound. So if you're looking for a phone that's right for you, visit Doro.com. Doro, it's a doddle.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Very good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio doing PMQs Unpacked. It's the last day of term before they all clear off for the summer holidays. Tim Shipman, chief political commentator of the Sunday Times, is still here. Stig Abell off a Times Radio breakfast is still here. You having fun, Stig?
I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I don't think it was very high-quality politics, but I've enjoyed the exterior banter.
Good, which is why we were so late to the news. Lara Spirit is here, Red Box reporter, taking a look at the best of the rest. A good last day of term, Lara?
They were pretty badly behaved, but there were some good questions.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
There was a lot of Lindsay Hoyle interventions.
Stig's been enjoying that.
It just winds me up.
You hate them?
I hate it. It's just so naff.
I won't have a word said against the MP for Chorley.
I know you love him and all that, but it's so awful. And it's such a bad advert for democracy, I think, him pootling away like a sort of old bad teacher. It winds me up every time I hear it.
If we had another chair, we could have Patrick Maguire in it to do Don't Touch the Lathe, but we haven't. So, Lara, where are we going first?
We are going predictably to Stephen Flynn, who's obviously back, and true to the mugs that were left on journalist desk this morning, indicating there'd be some sort of jibe around the 2-child benefit cap. We had exactly that, but it was actually pretty artfully done. And the second question that we'll play now had a great allusion to something that Harold Wilson said. To see if you can pick up on
one
it.
for the young people.
Mr. Speaker, voters in Scotland are used to child poverty under the Tories. They almost expect it. But what they don't expect is child poverty support from the Labour Party. And if we look very closely right now, there is a shiver running along the Labour front bench looking for a spine. But Mr. Speaker, does this not tell us something much bigger? That for children living in poverty in Scotland, Westminster offers them no real change. It offers them no real hope.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the best route out of poverty is through work, Mr. Speaker, and the best way to ensure that children do not grow up in poverty is to ensure that they do not grow up in a workless household. That's why we are focused on creating more jobs, with 200,000 more in Scotland since 2010, and hundreds of thousands fewer children across the United Kingdom growing up in a workless household. We will always continue to reduce child poverty. I don't want to see a single child grow up in poverty, and we will deliver that in every part of the UK, including in Scotland.
I know we've talked about this before, but it's been a really notable shift in the past only really couple of months. That Stephen Flynn's now using his questions at PMQs to attack Labour as much, if not more, than the government.
Yeah, it's interesting, and often you hear Lindsay Hoyle try to discipline Rishi Sunak for asking questions of Keir Starmer, but actually Stephen Flynn rarely gets, similarly
We just got some
disciplined
weird coughing from Lindsay Hoyle then, didn't he? Was that Lindsay Hoyle making
a little grumble,
noise?
which Stig didn't like much.
Yeah. He started and he said, I can't be bothered.
It was late in the day at this point. But you'll have noticed that Harold Wilson comment, obviously used against Ted Heath. I thought very interesting. And as you say, the likelihood, given now that there are all those predictions that Labour will make great inroads north of the border come the next election, that it makes pretty good sense, you'd expect, for the Westminster leader to be taking a hit both at the Labour leader and the Conservative leader.
What's your reading of this, Tim? Is it...
Well, I just spent the whole time Googling shiver running up, looking for a spine to run up, and Lara spoilt it. I was going to be like the kid in class who knew the answer, having Googled it.
Sorry. She knows. She's read all the
But
Harold
yes, I
Wilson
mean, it's the battle in Scotland is essentially between the SNP and the Labour Party, and you're going to see a lot more of that.
But
on our own
what's your
benches.
reading of the Labour position of keeping the 2-child ban? Because although Labour MPs are upset about it, and the SNP are very upset about it, the public still like it, don't they?
Yeah, and I think there's an element of the sort of Dominic Cummings strategy during the referendum of putting a very large and not quite accurate number on the side of a bus. Everybody's talking about it, and if you haven't yet noticed that Rachel Reeves keeps enforcing U-turns on the Labour Party to enforce fiscal responsibility, you're probably more likely to notice it with this one than you have with the 2 or 3 other things that she's done recently, and it's quite a good way, the louder his own party screams, the more the sort of moderate floating voter goes, oh, actually, these people might be quite serious about not spending all our money this time.
This is the ghost of Corbyn point, I think, isn't it? That manifesto that he did whenever it was 2019, which had individual policies in it which polled pretty well.
Yeah.
But the net effect of it was no one believes you've got the money to do it. That seems to be the dominant force behind everything that Starmer's doing.
It was
now.
the free broadband that flipped everyone out.
And
even people who wanted free broadband.
And free good broadband is a really good idea. It would actually would work, and nationalising the rails was popular and all of that. But taken as a whole, people thought, we can't trust you with the money. I just wonder if that's the main
You've
thing.
Just gone mad.
The main thing that's on his mind the whole time.
Lovely stuff. Well, that was a good one, Lara. Who is up next?
Mark Francois.
End of term truth.
And this is regarding, he's already made comments to this effect, but he makes them much more strongly now about that peculiar video from Tobias Ellwood, chair of the Defence
Actually, in fact, before we hear the Mark Francois, can we hear we have got a bit of the Tobias Ellwood video. Have you both seen it?
It's unbelievable.
I think the weirdest... So basically, Tobias Ellwood is the chairman of the Conservative... He's the Conservative MP, chairs the Defence Select Committee, went to Afghanistan, and his basic argument was the government should think again about engaging, but with the Taliban and trying to improve the people's lives there. But ended up basically what sounds like a video for a timeshare. Let's take a listen.
Well, I'm here back in Helmand Province in Afghanistan, courtesy of the Halo Trust, and all that's happened here since 9/11. This is a very different country indeed. It feels different now that the Taliban have returned to power.
Well, it may be hard to believe, but security has vastly improved, corruption is down, and the opium trade has all but disappeared.
Yeah, the reason security's improved is because the Taliban aren't fighting the democratic government anymore. Anyway,
the music as well.
I know it's
Who
the
put
music.
The music on that.
The music really takes
Take the music
a
off.
place in the sun territory.
Yeah, he's talking about the Taliban.
Yeah.
A senior Conservative got in touch with me last night and said that Tobias Ellwood is so dense that light bends around him.
Wow. Well, let's find out what Mark Francois had to say about him at PMQs.
Speaking of which.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister mentioned our armed forces. Can I mention them again? We lost 457 personnel in Afghanistan killed, and several thousand who suffered life-changing injuries. So I and some of my colleagues on the Defence Committee were absolutely stunned to see a video posted by our own chairman lauding the Taliban's governance of Afghanistan, not mentioning they're still trying to identify and kill Afghan civilians who sided with NATO forces, and also not mentioning the fact they don't like girls to go to school. So can I make plain this was not in our name, and can I have the Prime Minister's assurance that this silly and naive act was not in his name either?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I join with my honourable friend in paying tribute to our brave serving personnel and veterans and thank them for their service, as indeed we've touched on earlier today. And we have repeatedly and will continue to repeatedly call out the human rights abuses that we see around the world, and he mentions rightly the prohibition on women being educated in Afghanistan, which is something we've spoken about in the past. But we will also continue to have dialogue with regimes. That doesn't mean that we consider those regimes to be legitimate or approve of their actions, but that is all part, as he will understand, of establishing normal diplomatic presence in countries when the situation allows. But I'll very happily look into the specific case that he brought up with me.
I mean, that's a very odd answer, isn't it?
I mean, it's
Why can't you just say
down.
yes? I mean, you just
What's he going to look up? Or
I
play the
don't
whole
know.
video?
I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe you like the music or something.
I mean, given that there was an exchange on this in the Commons yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday, wasn't it? Where Mark Francois said basically the same thing. Ian Duncan Smith had a go. Johnny Mercer, actually, who was the Veterans Minister, was much clearer than Rishi Sunak was then.
Yeah, it's interesting. There seems to be some ministerial discretion on this. It's not that Rishi Sunak actually hasn't seen the case clearly when he was, preparing for this answer. Yeah. He would have been able to see it. That's a holding answer, right? And he was given the opportunity to outrightly condemn Tobias Ellwood, and he chose not to. So it was an interesting answer in that respect. And actually, you can say we're going to talk to regimes without considering they're legitimate, without saying when you're given the opportunity.
Just out of the music.
It's that simple. You fixed it.
But he's gone off resident because Tobias Ellwood came on our programme saying he wanted to rejoin the EU.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he's not clearly a solid member. I said go and join the Lib Dems then. And he was like, that's a disgraceful thing to say. But I don't think it is. I mean, is he really a Tory anymore?
He's a very, very odd man. I once sat down and had a coffee with him in Portcullis House where he explained to me how he was planning to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and did I have any advice for him. And my advice was, don't start telling that to journalists before you've got the first clue how to go about it.
I remember what I said against him. He came on to talk to us about woodwork, and he said he'd invented the cat-friendly rocking chair.
What can you say to that?
If
he's so, I mean, that sounds like the kind of innovative thing he should go and pursue as a career option.
The trouble with a traditional rocking chair is you can squash a cat under it.
So are we saying on his manifesto as prospective leader, there's praise the Taliban, rejoin the EU, rocking chairs for cats.
Yes. No, not for cats. Cat-friendly.
Cat-friendly rocking chairs.
Apparently the rock is in the arms rather than in the feet.
You don't want to think of a squashed cat, do you?
That makes me feel really horrible and uneasy to imagine a poor cat being...
Not Tobias Ellwood, the cat.
He's got your vote then. This is right up your street.
Slightly more concerned about the girls in Afghanistan, personally.
No. Somebody think about the cats.
As the father of two
chairs.
daughters.
Yeah.
I think he's a lunatic.
Yeah, but think of that music on it though.
Think of the music.
Think of the music.
Yeah.
Lara, can you possibly top that?
Well, there are a couple of questions with regards to Nigel Farage's spot of banking difficulty that would be worth listening to. There was David Davis, but also Jacob Rees-Mogg, who I think will go to.
Who works, of course, with Nigel Farage, so, you know.
It's a narrow church.
Maybe they've been talking about it at the staff canteen.
So, yeah, take a listen to this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend share my unease that a bank that has the government as its largest shareholder should close the account of a senior opposition politician? Will he
TV presenter.
use the government's shareholding to ensure that there is an inquiry into these circumstances, because the subject data access request makes it clear, or certainly indicates, that it is the person concerned's political views that led to his cancellation? And does my right honourable friend agree with me that however much we may find them tiresome, members of the opposition deserve bank accounts?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it wouldn't be right if financial services were being denied to anyone exercising their right to lawful free speech. Our new Financial Services and Markets Act puts in place new measures to ensure that politically exposed persons are being treated in an appropriate and proportionate manner. And having consulted on the payment services regulations, we are in the process of cracking down on this practice by tightening the rules around account closures. But in the meantime, any individual can complain to the Financial Ombudsman Service, which has the power to direct a bank to reopen their account.
He sets that right up, hasn't he?
Yeah. Finally, somebody mentioned the Ombudsman. What a way to go out at the end of term, Lara. Thank you for that.
Sorry.
Has he missed a trick there? I mean, it's sort of even people who fundamentally disagree with Nigel Farage on anything can see that this is quite bad.
I've tweeted about it. I think it's absolutely absurd. And I mean, how have they been caught with their trousers so comprehensively around their ankles, effectively briefing the BBC, lying about why they'd closed the account, and then having written it all down in emails so that it would be subject to a...
And now, presumably, we talked about this earlier, anyone with a Coutts bank account is going to do a public access request.
Sure. Yeah.
Discover what they think of them and then take their business elsewhere.
Can you imagine the range of people who have Coutts bank accounts?
I mean, is there not a Saudi Arabian or a Russian or any one of these people?
There must be some people to whom you could ask a certain amount of questions about their practices and beliefs, I would imagine.
And the fact that Nigel Farage says some objectionable things on a TV channel that most people don't watch does not seem to be grounds to kick him off. But there we are. Well, I've covered a lot of ground. Have you had a nice time, Stig?
I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the follow-up questions as well, Lara. I thought they were good. I thought they were slightly better in some ways than the main event.
Well, they usually are, to be honest.
But we'll get you back again to do it. But I'd love to get Asma to do it next time.
It was good, wasn't it, hearing Mark from... I mean, it's a very serious and important issue, but he did sort of present it as if it was the sort of start of World War III that he was discussing.
Not in our day.
Even though I know there's critical views of Mark Frost, it wasn't a bad question.
No, it was a good question. It was well phrased, and he gave it some theatre, didn't he?
And he is a very gentle underarm towards Rishi Sunak, which he just
then sort of,
It told him to call the Ombudsman.
I'll bring out the Ombudsman line. Don't worry, guys, it's coming. Here it comes.
Lovely to see you all. Lara, what time is the Red Box PMQs Unpacked email going to be in you? 3 p.m. Lovely stuff. Stig, you're back tomorrow.
Yeah, 6 o'clock.
And Tim, we'll see you in September.
Well, yes, but obviously people will hear from me before that.
From the art of the political lunch, over lunch, in a couple of weeks' time. Lovely stuff. Right, up next, we'll do the quiz. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
The Latitude Festival 2023 is coming. And starting tomorrow, Times Radio will bring you live backstage coverage across the weekend, including exclusive interviews and entertaining conversation. Tomorrow, Jane Garvey and Fee Glover will open proceedings live from Helen Park in Suffolk. And on Friday, Ruth Davidson will bring you all the sights and sounds direct from Latitude 2023. On Saturday, Hugo